man, they were this close to doing it to the Canucks again. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Kraken come back from a multi-goal deficit against the Canucks, again for the second time in a week, to tie it, send it to overtime, where unfortunately this time they end up falling in the shootout. They actually probably would have won overtime if they just kept going at 3-on-3 the way things were going, but they only get 5 minutes of that, aren't able to capitalize. We go to the shootout where, in spite of some early season success, the Kraken just historically have not been very good in the shootout. And yeah, it was only a 3-1 lead that the Canucks blew this time to the Kraken to allow them to at least get to overtime and get a point in the standings. And yeah, the Kraken did start their comeback quite a bit sooner this time. 12 minutes left in the game is when they got their second goal to make it 3-2 after the Canucks once again extended the lead they entered the third with early on in the third. But it still felt like going to overtime that this might be a repeat of 5 days ago, where the Kraken were going to pull it out and get those 2 points in the standings after, well, similarly, a game that really should never have gotten to the point where the Kraken needed to come back in the first place. And I mean that even outside of how the game itself went, which obviously we'll get to, but just like with the previous game, the Canucks came into this one still missing their two best defensemen. I mean, you had a game where the Canucks had a 3-1 lead and Tyler Myers played 25 minutes. So obviously the Kraken could have played this one a little bit better to find some more offensive opportunities, or at least capitalize on some more offensive opportunities. And they were also missing their top forward still in Elias Pettersson. So the Kraken, I mean, this is an outcome I'd probably be somewhat happy with, maybe still a little disappointed they couldn't pull it out in overtime, but a lot more content with if the Canucks had Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, or even Hronek. But honestly, with the lineup the Canucks were putting out, this is still a team the Kraken really should not have needed to go to overtime or needed a comeback to force overtime in the first place. But once again, similar to that game in Vancouver, the Kraken, honestly, I think were the better team in the first period, at least for the most part anyway, certainly early on in the first period. And I think played a much better third period this time than they did in Vancouver, even with the fantastic end to that with those 3 goals to force overtime that time. But for the second time in 2 games against the Canucks, the second period is one where the Kraken just could not get out of their own way for pretty much 20 straight minutes. But anyway, I suppose we might as well start off with things from the beginning, where with Grubauer net again for the Kraken, Decor's injury still keeping him out here, still day-to-day, but it's something that seems to be lingering on here a little bit longer than really anybody expected. At this point, I don't think really anybody knows how long it's going to take Decor to get back. Obviously, we'd like to have him back sooner rather than later, and Grubauer's been good for the most part in Decor's absence, though this game, I don't know that I'd say he was bad, but I also don't necessarily think he was good. He had some very good stops, but also would have been nice to have a save on at least one of the goals that Vancouver lets in. We'll get to all that, but it would be nice to have Decor back, we'll just put it that way. Certainly the Kraken having injuries at this point in the season, just like everybody else. Vancouver's injuries are a little bit more notable than Seattle's, but we're still missing Decor and Eberle, obviously, who's been out for quite a while and will still be out for a while longer. So yeah, middle of the season, everyone's dealing with some injuries here and there. Either way, the Kraken get off to a pretty good start in this game. It's all Kraken early on, and they make it count pretty early in their second shot on goal, just a couple minutes into the game. It's Chandler Stevenson coming down the boards into the offensive end, and right around from the faceoff dot, and outside of the face-off dot, he just fires off a shot that goes off the blocker of Demko and squeaks through him into the back of the net. It's one Demko would very much like to have back. It's a pretty soft goal that he allows. I don't think Stevenson was really trying to get anything other than a rebound or maybe a face-off in the offensive end. Either way, it finds its way through Demko's armpit, and the Kraken have the early 1-0 lead. But for any Canucks fans that may have been rolling their eyes at another soft goal from Demko after the first one he let in for Beniers in that game back in Vancouver, and I didn't see what happened against the Flames if he let in some soft ones there, but either way, it's been kind of a up and down return for Demko for however long that might have lasted, and we'll get there. But it has to be said that even after that soft one let in, Demko absolutely robs the Kraken a couple more times here in the early going. Not long after the Kraken take the 1-0 lead, it's Jaden Schwartz right out in front of the net, getting a pass from behind the net from either Beniers or Kakko, I can't remember which one, but he has Demko dead to rights, and Demko's able to go into the splits and make the pad save. And then not long after that, he's going to make a breakaway save on Bjorkstrand, so once again robbing another Kraken player. It wasn't the cleanest breakaway for Bjorkstrand. Wasn't even the cleanest breakaway he would have in this game, but still a pretty nice save from Demko, so he more than made up for that soft one he allows with 2 big saves there to keep the Kraken from extending the lead. And then as we get more into the middle of the period, things start to even out, the Canucks settle into the game a bit, and it starts to become a little bit more back and forth. We're starting to get some extracurriculars between the two teams, or at the very least anyway, between Dakota Joshua and Brandon Montour, who eventually end up taking trading roughing calls and heading to the box to give us some 4-on-4 midway through the period. Which, real quick here, I gotta say that, well, I understand just because of the general way that things are officiated in the NHL, why they just decided to go with traded roughing calls here. Realistically, I don't really know what Montour did physically anyway to earn his half of these 2 roughing calls. I guess he must have just hurt Joshua's feelings bad enough that they gave him a roughing call for psychological torment. Either way, anything that happened physically between the two of them was pretty much all done by Joshua. It starts a couple minutes earlier when the two of them kind of get tangled up. Joshua ends up falling to the ice, and I don't know if he thought that Montour did it on purpose or what happened there, but while he's laying at Montour's feet, he just cross-checks him in the knee, so Montour falls on top of him, and then they trade a couple pushes and shoves from there, I think somewhat understandably. A couple minutes later, they once again get tangled up as they come towards the Kraken net, and Dakota just takes Montour's feet right out from under him into the net. Montour doesn't really do anything other than hold his stick as he goes away, and that leads to traded roughing calls for some reason. Either way, we go to 4-on-4, nothing comes of that. And then eventually, as we get back to 5-on-5, the Canucks are going to even things up off of just a couple of pretty unfortunate bounces for the Kraken. It's a shot on net from well out that gets deflected off of Gord or somebody on the way from one side of the net to the other. So then with the deflection, or partially blocked shot, however you want to look at it, the shot doesn't even end up on net, one that Grubauer probably would have been able to see all the way coming and made a pretty easy save on. Instead, it deflects out to the far side, where the only guy over there is, I think it was Danton Heinen. Fortunately, he doesn't really expect it to be coming to him either, but it bounces off of his foot right back out in front of the net, where of course the only guy there, and this part obviously not that well defended by the Kraken, so they could have done a little bit more to help themselves, but it bounces off of a Kraken player, off of Heinen, and right out in front of the net, where Max Sasson is the only one standing in front of Grubauer, and he's able to slap that loose puck in just past the outstretched pad of Grubauer as he tries to lunge to the far side. Just not quite in time, and the game is tied. So yeah, this one I'm not going to put on Grubauer too much. It's just a couple of pretty unfortunate bounces, and then a Canuck player left all alone in front of him, so not really helped out too much by the defense in that respect, but I don't think you can blame him too much here. The Kraken will get a late power play in the period, which does go pretty well for them. Some good puck movement, a couple of pretty good chances, but again, Demko's up to the challenge after that easy one that he let in early on. The Canucks then will get a power play right as this Kraken one comes to an end that will span the intermission. The Kraken able to kill all of that off without too much trouble. I mean, I guess they did make Grubauer have a couple of saves going into the intermission, but they kill off the second half of it as we start the second period pretty easily. The rest of the second period, though, does not seem very easy for the Kraken, as they just could not, like I said at the beginning, get out of their own way pretty much the entire 20 minutes of the second period. They got a couple of chances here and there, but even those chances were much more of that one-and-done variety. The Kraken just getting a rush chance or getting into the offensive end, getting one shot off on net, and then the Canucks once again have possession. The best chance, I think, of this entire second period was another Bjorkstrand breakaway, this time a little bit more clean, but again, he can't beat Demko, or at least I think it was still Demko. Actually, it might have been Lehkonen at the point where Bjorkstrand gets the breakaway. Either way, we'll get there. The Kraken can't get out of their own way, whether it's in their end of the ice, and they let the Canucks have a lot of time in their end of the ice over the course of the second period. But even in the neutral zone, the Kraken couldn't really make anything happen. The few times they get into the offensive end, like I said, they don't really stay set up for very long, and when they do, they either don't get a shot off on net before turning it over, or they turn it over as soon as they do get the shot off. So with all that going on, it seems inevitable that the Kraken will eventually give up the lead, and that's just what they do. About 8 minutes into the second period, some sloppy neutral zone play from the Kraken sees them turn over the puck at the Canucks blue line. The puck quickly gets past all of the Kraken as they completely lose Garland at their blue line. He gets in on the breakaway, and for the second time in as many games, he puts it past Grubauer on the breakaway, just outweighting him and hooking it around his toe into the net to give the Canucks the 2-1 lead. At which point there's a change of net, but not the Kraken net, although I suppose it would be kind of surprising for a coach to pull a goaltender in a 2-1 game, especially when your AHL goaltender is your backup at this point in time. And considering the goal that was allowed was a breakaway goal, and even if Grubauer could have played it a little bit better, at that point we're nitpicking Grubauer, where certainly the worst part of this was the way that the skaters in front of him played to allow the breakaway in the first place. But no, the change in net is in Vancouver's net, where Demko ends up leaving, and Demko would go right down the tunnel and never return. So certainly a situation that Vancouver fans have to be pretty anxious seeing play out, especially with the injury that Demko had only recently come back from earlier on in December, and the fact that it was not obvious what caused whatever it was that had him leave the game and not return. There's a moment a couple minutes before this goal goes in and Demko takes himself out where one of the defenders, I think it was Noah Juleson, collides with Demko. Honestly, it's not even so much of a collision, it's just kind of the two of them bumping into each other as Juleson's trying to work his way in front of the net and Demko's drifting backwards. They just kind of bump legs and Demko falls to the ice somewhat dramatically, so I don't know if whatever that bump was just hit him wrong and it tweaked something and he went down pretty hard. He ended up staying in the game for a couple more minutes. I'm pretty sure he is the one that makes the save on the Bjorkstrand breakaway, so maybe something on that breakaway, the way he had to play it, maybe that's what set it off. It's hard to say for sure. But either way, he pulls himself from the game after this Garland goal goes in. From some reports after the game, it sounds like it could just be back spasms and not a re-aggravation of the knee injury. But it did look like he was favoring one of his legs as he got off the ice, and he was seen limping around in front of the locker rooms in the hallway there after he left the bench. So it's hard to say, but certainly not a good sign. And a non-contact or at very least light contact injury like that could turn out to be a pretty bad one, especially considering what he was coming back from. Obviously, we'll hope Demko the best and that he can get back and this isn't some sort of large setback that keeps him out for another big chunk of the season. Either way, for this game, it does mean that Lankinen steps in and plays the back half of it, which he isn't really tested that much early on. I think the Kraken might have gotten a couple shots in a quick response to that goal from Garland that gave the Canucks the lead, but nothing particularly dangerous. And then the Kraken have their worst couple of shifts, or I guess technically one shift of the period, as they allow the Canucks to hem them into their end of the ice for pretty much 4 straight minutes. I think they got it clear into the neutral zone at one point, long enough to get 2 forwards changed. But I'm pretty sure it was Larson, Alexiak, and Wright that are out there for, or at least certainly Larson and Alexiak were out there for a 4-minute shift, and I know Wright got stuck out there for quite a while. You could tell by the end of it that they were completely gassed. Even Bjorkstrand was stuck out there for quite a while as well. So yeah, the Kraken somehow managed to survive that. A couple of pretty nice saves from Grubauer, is especially Larson and Alexiak were basically just trying to stand and get in the way more than anything else, try to get to pucks as they got rebounded off of Grubauer. Eventually the Kraken are able to survive all of that, get the puck to the far end, get a change, and get a little bit of a press towards the back half of the second, but not much before the Canucks get a couple more shots on net, and mercifully the Kraken survive all of it to get to the second intermission, still down just 2-1. Where quite honestly, the Kraken could have easily been down 3-1 or maybe even 4-1 the way that they played the majority of this second period. And yeah, you probably felt similarly about the first, that the Kraken could have easily come away from the first with a lead, but the second period does not go very well for them for a 3rd straight game coming out of the break. So again, for the second time in as many games in less than a week for the Kraken, they play a poor second period against the Canucks, allow them to take a lead into the 3rd, and then for the second time, allow the Canucks to extend that lead early on in the 3rd. The Canucks get a power play that really doesn't go much of anywhere, but back at 5-on-5, they are able to find the back of the net again, and this one is one where I think Grubauer probably could have made a little bit more of an effort on. Well, okay, maybe effort's not so much the issue here, it's a shot that you really need Grubauer to come up with a save on. It's not an easy save, but especially considering the context of the game, you're already down a goal in the 3rd period, you need to come up with the save here, and from a fan perspective, you especially need to come up with one considering who's taking the shot. And it's not free of defensive blunder. The Kraken do leave Tyler Myers completely wide open on this one, and the pass from Miller crosses Grubauer's face from right next to him out into the wide open ice from where he takes the shot, and the screenshot makes it look like it's better defended, but honestly, this is just a couple of Kraken players trying to scramble to try to dive in front of the shot one way or another. Neither of them are able to get there, and it finds its way over Grubauer's shoulder into the far top corner of the net. and the Canucks have a 3-1 lead, and they even managed to give Tyler Myers a goal. And to make matters worse, not long after this goes in, the Canucks are pressing once again offensively to try to make it 4-1, and who knows, maybe the fact that they were trying to make it 4-1 that quickly is what turned things around in this game, as the Kraken end up with a power play. Once again, it's Miller to the boxes. He did not have a very disciplined game, to say the least. And the Kraken on the power play, once again, moving the puck very well, getting a couple of very good looks, some more good saves as Lankinen is locked in at this point and, well, picking up right where Demko left off, just without having given up the easy goal to start things off. But the Kraken eventually are able to capitalize here right as the power play is about to come to an end. Still in the power play, it still counts as a power play goal. But in the last couple of seconds of it, it's Montour circling with the puck down by the faceoff dot. He gets it down below the goal line for right. Tic-tac-toe up to Beniers in the slot and buried into the net. Tic-tac goal. PPG. Beniers his third goal in 3 games as he comes out of that goalless drought absolutely on fire. And this one isn't even fluky in any shape, way, or form. It's just a nice goal from Beniers, roofing it into the top of the net over the shoulder of Lankinen, who really doesn't have much of a chance. And the Kraken are back to within 1 just like that. So the Kraken get the power play goal when they desperately needed it, and it looks like they're going to get some momentum coming out of it and maybe turn this thing around and not even need to have some heroics in the end of the game like they did in Vancouver. But that momentum is quickly crushed and not turned back the other way, fortunately. Vancouver's just able to settle this one down, and it's a pretty evenly played, low-event middle part of this third period. Not much happening at either end of the ice, so we get into the final couple of minutes with the Kraken still needing 1 to at least force overtime, where eventually it forces them to pull Grubauer. Vancouver's never able to get a good chance on the empty net. They did barely miss it at one point in that game in Vancouver, but they never even get close this time. They can hardly get it across the blue line. They're able to do so a couple of times, but eventually from just inside the blue line, it's Burakovsky that makes a nice play along the boards to keep the puck in and then passes it right along the blue line to Vince Dunn on the far side right in front of Vancouver bench. And with just under a minute left, from well out, so far out up in the corner by the blue line that if Dunn was any farther out, he'd be across the blue line and this whole thing would be offside and never would have counted. But nonetheless, he fires the shot off on net and it's into the back of it to tie the game. And the Kraken have completed a second multi-goal comeback as the Canucks blow it once again late in the game. The goaltender pulled makes the difference for the Kraken. Dunn's shot finds its way through what had to be about half the players on the ice, including Lankinen. And of course, again, he was kind enough to fire off that shot right in front of the Vancouver bench so that they could all get a good look at that game-tying goal and their completion of that blown lead. And following Dunn's 8th of the season, the Kraken don't get quite as much of a really any kind of press like they did to try to take the lead at the end of regulation in the game in Vancouver. This time, the rest of the time just kind of goes off the clock rather harmlessly. We get to overtime, where the Canucks get the early possession. It's Tyler Myers with the puck, and he very nearly tries to hand the game to the Kraken again as he goes tape to tape with Jared McCann in the Canucks end of the ice, but McCann just isn't quite able to find a shooting lane to fire the puck off on net. I mean, he probably could have found one, but with possession being so important, it's just not a high enough danger opportunity for him to take that shot and give the possession right back. The Kraken, though, over the course of this overtime, well, it really did feel like if the overtime had been longer, the Kraken were going to find a way to win it. They get a couple of pretty good chances. Only one of them ends up on net. It's another breakaway from Bjorkstrand that he just cannot solve Lankinen, just as he couldn't solve Demko earlier on in the game. The Canucks do get one pretty good chance in a scramble out in front of the net as Grubauer comes up with a save and then the puck drifts through the crease, but none of the Canucks can get their stick on it. I think it was Burakovsky that ends up getting the puck out to safety. Unfortunately, at the end of overtime, I will say the one complaint I have here from a Kraken perspective is that there was no real urgency from the Kraken as the last 20 seconds are ticking off to try to get the puck down to the other end of the ice and just get one more shot off. And once you get into the final 10 seconds, you might as well skate down there and just shoot something at the net. At that point, you don't have to worry about possession because it's not like it's going to come back the other way in any kind of time to get an opposing shot on net. But they just kind of let those final seconds tick off and we go to the shootout where, well, I suppose I guess they must have had more confidence in their shootout abilities than certainly I do anyway. So I didn't have a great feeling going into the shootout, and well, nothing we saw in the shootout is really going to change that feeling next time around. Miller's the only one to score. He's the first one to shoot on the Kraken net. He scores, and none of the three Kraken players back the other way score. Grubauer does make one save, but yeah, it's Bjorkstrand first that isn't able to get it to go. Capo Caco, which I thought was kind of fun to see them give him a try. He isn't able to get one to go, and then Beniers is stopped on the last shot, so the Canucks come away with that 4-3 shootout victory. Maybe it's just the bias and the fact the Kraken aren't very good at it, but I'm starting to get at a point where honestly I'd rather just it be a tie if they don't score in overtime. Either way, still 1 point in the standings. Unfortunately for the Kraken, going 3 points and 3 points and just kind of a wash in these two games against the Canucks, it's not really what they need as they try to catch the Canucks in the standings and a couple of other teams to get back into this playoff race. It's still definitely a long shot, but at least getting 1 point helps to some degree. They'll get now an Oilers team coming in that's playing pretty well, and a Devils team after that that's playing even better. Then a stretch of games as they go off on the road that they'll need to take advantage of if they do want to get back in this playoff chase. Either way, we can talk about that as these next games come and go. But for now, even though, again, it was a fun, exciting, multi-goal third period comeback to at least get that 1 point in the standings, it does kind of feel like wasted potential, especially as, again, Montour said after the game that, well, the Canucks were missing some bodies, and he didn't say this, but I think it was implied, some pretty important bodies, and these are the type of games that you need to be able to take advantage of, and the Kraken just didn't really do that. They have the Canucks missing their top two defensemen, and really they're only two good defensemen. I mean, no offense to Carson Soucy, but he's not a top pairing defenseman, or shouldn't be a top pairing defenseman on any team that isn't trying to tank. And the Kraken still just could not really generate anything offensively until they absolutely desperately needed to towards the end of the game. Certainly, at least not in that middle frame. The lack of offensive production in that middle frame against this D-core is the big problem, I think, not only in this game, but also the one in Vancouver, even though they came away with the 2 points in that game. But if you disagree or just want to look at things more positively after a game that had a somewhat exciting end, just look at things more glass half full, feel free to do so down in the comment section. We could always use some more positivity regardless of how realistic the positive outlook on the season is right now. I'm not going to say no to some positive comments here and there. Otherwise, let's finish this thing out with some Kraken 3 stars. We can definitely come up with at least 3. As far as what 3 and in what order, that might be a little bit more difficult. I suppose for me, the first star probably has to be Vince Dunn, right? The game-tying goal there at the end. And another, not his best game, but still a pretty good game from him. A couple of times there where they did get a bit trapped in their own end. And yeah, he is one of the guys that kind of lost Garland there on that breakaway goal that gave Vancouver the 2-1 lead. So not perfect, but yeah, another good finish to the game there. He gets the goal, the third goal now for him in 2 games against the Canucks. He had not the game tying one, but the one that made it a 1-goal game, and then the overtime winner in the first game, and now ties it here with a minute left in this one. And also got an assist on the Stevenson goal way back at the beginning of the game, so a 2-point night for Dunn. A pretty good game overall. Second star, I'm going to go with Matty Beniers. It's another easy one. He's another goal scorer in the game and also was an official star just like Dunn in this one. Another 2-point night for Beniers, though. He continues this now goal streak coming out of the goal drought. How fun it would be if he turned a 20-goal streak coming out of a 20-goal drought. Not particularly likely, but it'd be fun. But again, like Dunn, he also picks up an assist on Dunn's goal, actually, there that finishes out the comeback to tie things into overtime. He was one of the guys that helped win that puck battle along the boards that got it up to Burakovsky, who then got it across to Dunn. So Beniers a pretty good night, and just in general, his line was not quite as dominant as they were in the first meeting between these two teams, and not as good as they were in the game between against Utah. A little bit more even, but still a good night for them. They got off to a very good start. They were very dominant in the first period, especially the first half of the first period. They were all over the Canucks, especially offensively. And then a little bit more even back and forth, some good shifts, some not so good shifts as the rest of the game went along. They, I guess, were the line that was on the ice for that neutral zone fiasco that led to that breakaway goal for Garland. So, yeah, Dunn and Beniers kind of all part of that play, but they added 2 points back the other way. And then the third star, since it's been tough for him and he did have a 2-point night, I'm going to go with Andrei Burakovsky. He gets 2 assists on the night, and they are both primary assists as well. One on the first goal, one on the last goal, so he bookends the night with assists. So certainly as far as relatively this season has been going for him, a pretty good night offensively. And that line, while it still wasn't fantastic, certainly was a lot better than it has been the last couple of games. It still seems like that's 3 guys that are gripping the stick pretty tight right now. Even McCann is in quite a bit of a scoring drought right now, as well as Stevenson and Burakovsky, even with Burakovsky now picking up 2 assists in this game, and Stevenson does get the goal, but it was kind of a fluky one, so they didn't really produce much as far as high danger chances are concerned. It's still a line that we do need to see a lot more offensive production out of, and a lot more consistent offensive production to really feel good about where that's at, but it was a step in the right direction, and they at least got on the scoreboard, and Burakovsky had generally a pretty good night. But again, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. If there's different guys you go with for 3 stars, if you wouldn't have 3 stars, maybe a guy that could be an honorable mention in this one, I think would be Oliver Bjorkstrand. I don't think he got a point in this game, but he did have 3 breakaways, so some pretty good opportunities for him and a couple good shifts. Kaapo Kakko, again, looked pretty good. He had 1 shift down in the offensive end where he was basically fighting 2 or 3 Canucks players single-handedly off the puck, trying to find some way to get it out to one of his teammates and get some possession. It was just kind of push one guy one way, then scramble back, push another guy off the other way. Just a one-man effort there, winning the puck battle along the board. Definitely had some physical forecheck to the Kraken that they, well, could use a little bit more of. Anyway, with that, I'm going to stop my rambling and cut it off there. Until next time, against the Oilers for the first time this season, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.